Right, we've come to the end of section 1.2 where we've learnt a number of things. We've seen how to run the Erlang shell, and what we do in the Erlang shell is type expressions followed by a full stop, and what we get back from the shell is the result of that expression. And we'll see that that's a very powerful mechanism. We can do all sorts of things like run concurrent programs and so on from there, but for the moment what we're doing is looking at functional programs. We've seen how to write a simple Erlang program. We've seen the variety of data in Erlang, from simple data like numbers, atoms, booleans and so on, to compound data including functions as well as lists and tuples. And we've seen how Erlang variables are used to hold intermediate values, how they can be used in patterns, and we've seen the Erlang pattern matching mechanism that is underlies the assignment that we've seen, which is single assignment. So variables in Erlang are names for values. They are not names of storage locations whose values change. That's crucial. Finally, we've seen how to use a bit of pattern matching in practice, and you've tried some things out. What I thought I would do is conclude this section just by doing a bit of live coding of some simpler examples than the ones you did in the last exercise. And then what I'd encourage you to do is in the forum, you can compare examples, compare solutions that you've come up to for the exclusive OR problem. I'll give you one here, but there are many more. But before we do that, I asked you to write a function to tell me how many of three values were equal. Let me do a simpler problem. I've got a how many equal, which just takes two values. And what we'll do is we're using, I said, only use pattern matching. So if we have two values equal, the answer is 2. Otherwise, the answer is 0. Now we could write x comma y here. Let's do that and give the answer 0. Let's save that. Let's compile it in our shell. Now we're getting two errors. We're getting two warnings. It's not used, and that's because I didn't export it. So let's do that. Let's save that and compile it again. But we're getting warnings that variables x and y are not used, because indeed they're not used on the right hand side here. So what we can do is we can do two things. We can either replace them with an underscore, or we can actually replace them with a variable called underscore x underscore y. That just means that we can see by way of documentation that we've got variables like x and y here, but we're not using them. If we save that, we compile. You see, we're not getting any warnings now. So that gives us a way of suppressing those warning messages. On the other hand, you might want to see the warnings there. That's up to you. Let me give you one other solution to exclusive OR, and I wanted to show an example of mixing variables and literals in a pattern. So suppose the first argument of exclusive OR is true. What's the answer going to be? Well, if the second answer is true, exclusive OR is false. If the second answer is false, exclusive OR is true. So we can summarize that as saying that the answer is not x. Now, what about if the first argument is false? Well, if the first argument is false, for the whole thing to be true, x needs to be true. For the whole thing to be false, x will be false. So the answer there is x. And we can complete the definition there. Now let's just export that, because if we don't export it, we will see that it is. Let's save that, let's compile that, and we can see that EXOR of, say, true and false. Oh, I've done it again. It's simple colon EXOR. And the answer there is true. Remember, we can use up arrow to go back to that case, to the previous case. We can, if we change the false there to true, we get the answer false. So there you can see that we're getting the behaviour we want. If we look at false there, false at the beginning, we get the answer true. If we put 3 there, we'll get the answer 3. Now, this is because of Erlang's typing, we've not checked that x is a Boolean. We can do that if we wish, but we have, as things stand, x could be a number. It could be any value, in fact. So we just need to be aware. You could argue that I've over-defined the function, but when we use pattern matching, that pattern x will match anything where the first argument is false, and so we get that situation. That's something you need to be aware of perhaps in the future. And if you are worried about it, then you can actually put in a check to give you the behaviour you want. Okay, but let me conclude there. We've seen, as I said, we've seen using an editor to develop Erlang programs. We've seen the shell is a place where we can test those programs out. We've seen Erlang data of many forms. We've seen multiple clause function definitions where the selection between the clauses is through pattern matching. Now I'd encourage you to go on the forum, take a look at the different sorts of functions that you have, different sorts of definitions you've got for exclusive OR, and compare and contrast. See how many you can come up with. And also just check that you've got the right solution for how many equal when you have 3 arguments there. I've just given you an example here where there are 2 arguments, but you can see you can go along similar lines to work for 3. Okay, thanks very much. So that's it for this section. In the next section what we'll do is look at recursion.